Hi, today we're talking about coming out of survival mode. And the subtopic of that I want to really dive into is shifting from fear-based living to desire-based living. I'm Rachel McLeod. I help people do the brain work for resolving symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress. The brain has a beautiful process for this that is fast and effective and transformational and long lasting. I also am a coach, a therapist, and a mentor. Here we go. All right, so let's chat about this. Shifting people to desire-based living is my end goal. I'm really, I love helping people resolve symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress. It's so important. You want to get your life back. You want to be able to do and feel the way you want to do and feel, and what you want to do and feel. And I want to go farther than that. I want to take your mental health and your emotional intelligence and your emotional wellness really to a higher level, which is, I call it dream life creation. But I want your brain to be able to do that. I want to watch your brain be able to do dream life creation. Um, and that requires a shift from desire-based living. I mean, to from my screen did some things. From fear-based living to desire-based living. That requires that shift. And so while you are going to be doing all your stuff, I'm talking about if you work with me and my clients, and what's going on in Rachel's world. You do your healing work. You do your symptom resolution. You do resolve disorders. Yes, and we want your brain to make your life yours for you, a place where you're thriving, a place where you are experiencing fulfillment, satisfaction, joy. That's high level emotional and mental wellness, right? That's what we're going for. Not just to stop symptoms, because anxiety, depression, traumatic stress come and go. They're part of brain function. We don't want them hanging out for years and decades. No, we want them. I want you to get good enough where you can. They are coming in and coming out. Um, because your emotions will be doing that for the rest of your life. But really, it's bigger than that. We want joy and all the good things. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. And when we're in, there's a lot of work that has to go on to get from fear-based living to survival to, desire-based living. Um, Symptoms are a lot about fear. We're afraid of our symptoms. We're afraid of the situation that causes pain. We're afraid of pain, social pain, emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain. We're afraid of these things. We're afraid to experience them. We want to avoid them. And a lot of when that's the case, a lot of our behaviors can be just to avoid those things, even if they're good behaviors. What if you look underneath them, those behaviors, which might be like earning more money, finding a bigger house, getting a better job, having more peace in your relationships. Those can be great things to go after. But if you look underneath them, what's fueling them? Is there fear? I need this to happen so that everybody's at peace. I need to make more money so I can survive, right? These are survival motivations as opposed to desire. Oh, that's going to feel wonderful. It's going to feel amazing. I'm safe now. And I would like to have these specific things because that would be fulfilling, right? We're moving up in the triangle of the hierarchy of needs, right? And we're getting up to the self-actualization over here with desire-based living. Fear-based living is more, I don't have my needs met. I need to get my needs met. What can I do to get my needs met? I need this to happen so that my needs will get met in these ways. That is stressful. That is distressing. That is fear-based living. That is survival-based living. And it's a real place. And so we want to shift from there over to thriving. We're designed to thrive. We can thrive. We need to get that shift happening. The brain has a beautiful process for this, like I just said, and we need to work it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about that. Um, I start with people's inner world. right? So I want to make sure that their body is utilizing fear well. When the body's afraid of things, it's going to send, when we're afraid of things, our whole mind body system, we're maybe afraid of things that are real, maybe things that we perceive are real, that are a real threat. It doesn't matter, real or perceived, it doesn't matter. We're afraid of them. Our body's going to send information about that thing up in our brainstem, all through all the sensory information we have, and it's going to need to go past the survival system. But the survival system is looking for pain, social pain, emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain. If any of that stuff's present, the brain is like, we got to survive. So it'll shift out into survival states where this is where we're experiencing our symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress. Or fight, flight, freeze, faint responses. This part of the brain doesn't do higher level reasoning. It doesn't really care about any of that stuff. It actually will shut that part of the brain down when it activates. And so the information that was coming up to inform us about all of our fears actually gets kicked back down into the body, and we got to do this thing. Like, forget this. Let's go. Let's fight, flight, freeze, faint, or fawn. Right. And so the whole brain never actually gets to work with our fears. That fear energy didn't make it to the top. Right. And so while our body is like, I'm terrified, I'm afraid, our higher level reasoning isn't receiving any of the memos, isn't getting to review any of the reports, has no idea why the body's doing this, and actually can be like, chill, body. And now there's a separation between mind and body. Right? We want to correct this over and over and over again because we want to see the fear come up, make it past the survival system, get into the other parts of the brain. They will be like, oh, okay, I get it. I see what's going on. They will actually take that fear and they will use it to make hope, courage, new beginnings. It really does a lot of wonderful things with that fear energy. And we want to watch your brain do that. That's how we know your mind body system's functioning well with the fear energy running through it. Right? And this is the first thing that we're doing. Once the mind body system is not afraid of fear at the same level, right? It's like, okay, there's some fears I like, all these other fears, no, we're going to try to get more of the fears into that pile so that pile, I can take a lot of fear. This fear is actually good. Like, we're going to make a lot of courage and new beginnings and hope, right? We're going to do that with fear. So the body's changing its relationship with fear. And we want that. And we want to get more of these things over into that pile. The good fear guys, and the mind body system might be afraid of all these other ones, but we want to keep shifting them. Pretty soon, your life feels pretty safe because your mind body system is working with this fear. And then you get out of your comfort zone, and there's those other fears, right? And your brain, and then they happen in your brain. This is why we didn't go out there, because it's scary, right? So, but now that we're learning that we can meet new fears that we're afraid of and get that processed, and we get growth and expansion. We get more of ourselves back. Okay. And that's one of these pieces as well, because we're afraid of our inner world. We're afraid of our emotions. And so if we're going to be afraid of grief, right, we need to get that fear about the grief process so that then we can learn how to work with grief and get grief moving to the top, because the fear will activate the survival state, and then the grief that we might be experiencing never gets through and stays back down, and we're learning grief is bad. It's crashing the system because the fear is like, right? So we've got all these things working not in the right direction. And if we really work with your survival system by sending it messages of safety, in its language, the language that it responds to, which is the body, which is why all the interventions I teach people to use are mind-body interventions. And because we're actually targeting a very specific part of the brain. That part of the brain doesn't care about logic or reasoning, doesn't care. And but it does respond very, very fast when it's receiving signals of safety, even while all the pain and fear and challenging emotions are also running through the mind body system. When the body's giving the report about all the things that are scary, and you're sending these signals of safety in, that survival system is like, okay, yep, there's pain here, this is scary stuff, but we'll allow this stuff through because we're safe, and we can allow ourselves to process scary things when we're safe. And so that's just how that part of the brain is designed. It's like a gatekeeper. All of a sudden it hears about that we're safe, and it will let all the fears and worries and grief and all the emotions that we're afraid of or that we find difficult, or maybe that haven't processed for decades because our system couldn't process it. All of a sudden that gatekeeper is open, and finally this flood of new information is getting up. That feels wonderful when that's happening. You'll notice that you might feel more tension in the beginning, and all of a sudden you start one of these interventions. You start really communicating with that part of the brain in whatever intervention you're using. I teach four, but there are tons of them. But you start talking to that part of the brain, and all of a sudden you start feeling relief. You have more insights. You start having epiphanies, your way of being starts changing. The things you were afraid of, you just notice, I'm not that afraid of that anymore. This happens within seconds. An easy example of this is I've helped people resolve phobias, lifelong phobias, in like 10 minutes and to never come back. So it's just a bunch of fear about something, a spider, a worm, whatever, that was locked in the system that actually couldn't make it through the brain's healing process. And once we got that through, then all of a sudden they were not afraid of that thing any longer. And we can do that with anything and everything. We can do that with your own fear. Some people, we can do that with your own flashbacks, your own traumatic events. We can make it so that your body is just not phobic of your own traumatic experiences. And then once that gets resolved, the next team, the data processors, get in there and they really start understanding it, and they start using it for your health and wellness. Once they understand things, they're up there in your brain. They're like, oh, now that we understand what happened and what that was, we've got the world wrong here. We need to rewire this to this. We need to rewire this. And they start your map of the world gets more accurate, and there's more safety and wellness. And so that reduces your fear levels. And now you're looking out at the world like, huh, maybe I can be more present in my body. Maybe, and these things are happening unconsciously. So people tell me things like, oh, I was able to sit next to this person and it didn't bother me. I was able to watch this movie. It didn't even, this scene came on that would have triggered me before, and it did. I even felt like when my friend asked me to watch the movie that I was like, sure. Usually I'm like, I don't know. There could be one of those scenes that knocked me out for the 2 weeks, right? There's all these ways that we'll notice, oh, I'm not as afraid as I was. Oh, I'm actually living with more courage. I'll have people come back and tell me they had conversations they would have never touched before. They held their emotions in ways they would have never held their emotions. I have my clients coming back and saying, I'm more aware of myself. They felt safe enough to be aware. When we're afraid of something, we are going to avoid it, and we're going to disconnect from it. So we might notice dissociation, numbness, those sorts of things. So for us to start showing up as being present or more self-aware, that means we've lost some fear of the self. We don't think it unconsciously. We don't have a belief that if we are attending to ourselves, we're going to explode into fireballs of pain. So you'll start noticing some of these symptoms just resolving. You start noticing yourself being more present. And here we are on the path to shifting to desire-based living. And this is by resolving fears, and then also the fear of emotions. We start really aligning and working with and cooperating with and enjoying our emotions more, because we know that they all are part of our health and wellness, even the negative ones. So we'll start seeing that synergy with our emotions. A lot of people are afraid of what's going on in their inner world. A lot of people are afraid of finding some of the parts of themselves that we can call shadow parts, our shadow work, or we run into the parts of ourselves that are uncivilized and antisocial and just downright awful. I love those parts of us. Let me tell you, I love it when we find them, because they always bring parts of who you are, and as it goes through the brain, your processor, they get to hit the little stations in your brain. Sorry, I've got a setup here that's a little wiggly. They start to make it through the parts of your brain, the little factory sites where they get values and they get morals and they get words and they get timelines and they get understood. And now they're like made more for you. before they get processed in your inner world, uh, as maybe parts of you that you're never supposed to show up as, or maybe parts of you that have been done bad things, like maybe you sabotage somebody, or maybe you did this, because a lot of those are our desires that we're afraid of. We can't, I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But anyway, when we get those parts of us processed, we learn that they bring more of who we are. They give that we're more capable, and we don't have to be afraid of getting in scenarios where that part's going to come out, because now that part has also been combined with our values and our morals and our goals. And so now when that part comes out, they're helping us with our goals, our morals, our values. They're more, we call that integrated. They're not just riding solo, coming to the front, driving your bus by itself. They're, when they come through, they're more integrated. They like have a team. There's some synergy. They care, and they're aware of your values and your morals. So when they start expressing, it's more in alignment with you. Okay, so now we're moving closer to desires. Now we're also can be really afraid of our desires. I think I personally have had a hard time holding desires. I think, and I'm going to tell you a story. This is the story I think about desires. I think desires are divine. I think they are a divine energy that runs within us, right? The closest thing we will have to the divine. And I think it's hard for humans to hold the divine. And it's such a big energy that we have done some really awful things with our desires. And so I think that has made us really afraid of our desires and avoidant of them, and um, worrisome and nervous, and not really holding those desires well, and not integrating them, not processing them. And holding our desires is just like any other practice. You're going to learn to walk. You're going to have to fall down a couple times. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn how this works, how it doesn't work. But when we have these desires and we do things out of desire, and we find out that it's bad, and we sabotage somebody else, or we hurt somebody else, or we didn't even care because our desire was so strong, we can really have a lot of trauma around our desires and what we do with desires. And so some of this work along the way, and it happens at the same time. So I don't have these parts separated. I don't have units in my program where we're doing desire-based living. It's actually always happening at the same time. And so at the end of my 8-week course, you're doing more desires integration than a fear and trauma processing. However, um, when we can start having winning positive experiences with our desires, where we're watching ourselves demonstrate maturity with our desires and authenticity with our desires, that we're not just turning into people we don't respect with our desires, that we can also have desires and be people we respect. When we get there, which we do, because if we're processing our desires, if we're not too afraid of them, and then we can get them actually through the processor, um, that stuff happens naturally. Brains are great at that. Anything we're processing will go through a process of growth, maturation, and mastery. That's natural to brains. That's why you want your brain working on all this stuff. Don't think it through. Let your brain work on it. It's just everything awesome is going to happen if your brain is actually processing it, which is much different than intellectualizing and understanding it. Those are prefrontal cortex activities, which are wonderful, but they come last. They come after processing. Okay, it's a different way of doing things, but it is powerful. So as this happens, you find that you've made more peace with yourself. You find that you are avoiding less of yourself, less of others, and there's a natural reconnection that comes with things that you are not afraid of. So you were actually reconnecting with the self. You're more present. This is how we become more present, when we're not afraid of ourself or the experiences. Processing trauma really helps us feel more safe in the world, even if we've had horrible traumas. And so then we'll show up more safe. The less safe we feel, the more we're going to dissociate in moments. And it's okay. Well, it's okay to have spots where you're going to dissociate. That's normal brain function. The brain's saying, I'm not okay with this. Great. Thank you for letting me know. We're going to help you. Right. But we don't want a whole life of dissociation. Right. And that's where many of us are, have been, have experienced. And so we really want to shift that. And so because the natural occurrence occurs when that fear is not running, the brain will naturally bring you back in. It'll be safe for you to be in your body. It'll be safe for you to be in experiences, and you'll watch yourself pick up more details, and you'll just, it's like, it's a totally different perspective. You can, it's it's almost like you can smell more of what's happening. You can see more of what's happening. It's like instead of having a foggy view of thing, it's like it's like granular, like up close, clear, crystal clarity, and you're right there in it. And I know for if you don't have you've never experienced dissociation, that might sound like, but that's how life goes. Yeah. Well, for many of us, that's not what was happening. Okay, so it's a very new, weird in the beginning thing, but it's really as you sit there, you're also with being present, you're gaining more maturity, growth, and masteration. I totally butchered that. Growth, maturation, and mastery. About being present. So you're able to grow your presence. You're able to be present in more places. You'll start seeing it show up in little flashes here and there, and then it's more and more and more, and pretty much, and then soon there's mastery, and that's really where we want to get you to. So, and that's how the shift occurs to desire-based living, where your authentic desires are there because you're connected with yourself again. You can hear your own self. You can hear your thoughts. You can hear your feelings. You're not afraid to listen to yourself. You're not afraid to stand by yourself. You're not afraid to stand with yourself. And then you hear what the self wants. You see the things the self wants to bring into the experience. You see what the self needs, and you start, your whole mind body system starts responding to that, and your life starts, you're starting to just curate your life for you. And this is much different if you were raised to curate your life for other people. And so that transition is a strange transition, right? That's why we're gonna make sure your processor is processing, because all these strange feelings of newness, brains don't like that. They do not like that. And so they can get kicked out and not processed, but we want those processing too. All that weird, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do with all this space and peace in my mind. It feels a little boring, We want that processed. We're processing that. So and then we really find ourselves being more whole, owning more of ourselves, not needing to self-abandon, being able to hold, sometimes we can only hold one perspective, and our brain is able to hold multiple perspectives at the same time. And the more it can hold, the more accurate and dynamic things are. And so we want to do that with all of ourselves. So that's really the end of the journey, as far as I'm concerned. Once you're there, you're off and running, and you go live your life and do your thing. Maybe you pop back once in a while and help your system, your mind body system, process some fears and things like that. But that's health. That's my perspective of health. So when people come with me for our journeys, this is where we're going. So anyway, having said that, I want to invite you to enroll in my free program, Interventions for Inner World Transformation. I want you to practice, grab some interventions that work with this part of the brain and see what it does for you. I teach 3 of them in that program, and gosh, people tell me my symptoms are getting better. I'm having more clarity. There's less fog. Things are returning to normal. I'm feeling safer. I can feel a shift. I don't even know how to put it into words. Getting those interventions and trialing them really help your brain heal itself, walk through its process for resolving symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress. And you don't even have a lot of skill to get results. And if you find one of those interventions, or 2 or 3 of those interventions, just help your brain do its work and help make your health and wellness, you may want to join me on my journey of inner world transformation. It's a 4-phase process for resolving your symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress, and really transforming the way you do life, you reach your goals, and you show up in relationships, which is huge. And really, the process is all about how to get your brain to